Chapter 10 of Galactic Patrol by E. Smith. Chapter 10. Judged by any earthly standards, the planet Trenco was and is a peculiar one indeed. Its atmosphere, which is not air, and its liquid, which is not water, are its two outstanding peculiarities and the sources of most of its others. Almost half of that atmosphere, and by far the greater part of the liquid phase of the planet, is a substance of extremely low latent heat of vaporization, with a boiling point such that during the daytime it is a vapor and at night a liquid. To make matters worse, the other constituents of Trenco's gaseous envelope are of very feeble blanketing power, low specific heat, and of high permeability, so that its days are intensely hot and its nights are bitterly cold. At night, therefore, it rains. Words are entirely inadequate to describe to anyone who has never been there just how it does rain during Trenco's nights. Upon Earth, 1 inch of rainfall in an hour is a terrific downpour. Upon Trenco, that amount of precipitation would scarcely be considered a mist. For along the equatorial belt, in less than 13 Tellurian hours, it rains exactly 47 feet and 5 inches every night, no more and no less, each and every night of every year. Also, there is lightning, not in Terra's occasional flashes, but in one continuous blinding glare, which makes night as we know it unknown there, in nerve-wracking, battering, sense-destroying discharges, which make ether and sub-ether alike impenetrable to any ray or signal short of a full-driven power beam. The days are practically as bad. The lightning is not so violent then, but the bombardment of Trenco's monstrous sun through that outlandishly peculiar atmosphere produces almost the same effect. Because of the difference in pressure set up by the enormous precipitation, always and everywhere upon Trenco there is wind, and what a wind! Except at the very poles, where it is too cold for even Trenconian life to exist. There is hardly a spot in which, or a time at which, an earthly gale would not be considered a dead calm. And along the equator, at every sunrise and at every sunset, the wind blows from the day side to the night side at the rate of a trifle over 800 miles an hour. Through countless thousands of years, wind and wave have planed and scoured the planet Trenco to a geometrically perfect oblate spheroid. It has no elevations and no depressions. Nothing fixed in an earthly sense grows or exists upon its surface. No structure has ever been built there able to stay in one place through one whole day of the cataclysmic meteorological phenomenon which constitute the natural Trenconian environment. There live upon Trenco two types of vegetation, each type having innumerable subdivisions. One type sprouts in the mud of the morning, flourishes flatly, by dint of deeply sent and powerful roots, during the wind and the heat of the day, comes to full fruit in late afternoon, and at sunset dies and is swept away by the flood. The other type is free-floating. Some of its genera are remotely like footballs, others resemble tumbleweeds, still others thistledown. Hundreds of others have not their remotest counterparts upon earth. Essentially, however, they are alike in habits of life. They sink in the water of Trenco, they can burrow in its mud, from which they derive part of their sustenance, they can emerge therefrom into the sunlight, they can, undamaged, float in or roll along before the ever-present Trenconian wind, and they can enwrap, entangle, or otherwise seize and hold anything with which they come in contact, which by any chance may prove edible. Animal life, too, while abundant and diverse, is characterized by three qualities. From lower to the very highest it is amphibious, it is streamlined, and it is omnivorous. Life upon Trenco is hard, and any form of life to evolve there must of stern necessity be willing, yes, even anxious, to eat literally anything available. And for that reason all surviving forms of life, vegetable and animal, have a voracity and a fecundity almost unknown anywhere else in the galaxy. Thionite, the noxious drug referred to earlier in this narrative, is the sole reason for Trenco's galactic importance. As chlorophyll is to earthly vegetation, so is thionite to that of Trenco. Trenco is the only planet thus far known upon which this substance occurs, nor have our scientists even yet been able to either analyze or to synthesize it. Thionite is capable of affecting only those races who breathe oxygen and possess warm blood, red with hemoglobin. However, the planets peopled by such races are legion, and very shortly after the drug's discovery, hordes of addicts, smugglers, peddlers, and out-and-out pirates were rushing toward the new bonanza. Thousands of these adventurers died, either from each other's ray guns or under an avalanche of hungry Draconian life. But thionite being what it is, thousands more kept coming. Also came the patrol, to curb the evil traffic at its source by beaming down ruthlessly any being attempting to gather any Draconian vegetation. Thus, between the patrol and the drug syndicate, there rages a bitterly continuous battle to the death. Arrayed against both factions is the massed life of the noisome planet, omnivorous as it is, eternally ravenous, and of an individual power and ferocity and a collective aggregate of numbers, none of which is to be despised. And eternally raging against all these contending parties are the wind, the lightning, the rain, the flood, and the hellish vibratory output of Trenco's enormous, malignant, blue-white sun. This, then, was the planet upon which Kinnison had to land in order to repair his crippled Bergen home. And in the end, how well it was to be that such was the case. Kinnison of Tellus, greetings. Tregonsi of Rigel 4 calling from Trenco Spaceport. Have you ever landed on this planet before? No, but what? Skip that for a time. It is most important that you land here quickly and safely. Where are you in relation to this planet? Your apparent diameter is a shade under 6 degrees. We are near the plane of your ecliptic and almost in the plane of your terminator, on the morning side. That is well. You have ample time. Place your ship between Trenco and the sun. Enter the atmosphere exactly 15 GP minutes from check at 20 degrees after meridian, as nearly as possible on the ecliptic, which is also our equator. Go inert as you enter atmosphere, for a free landing upon this planet is impossible. Synchronize with our rotation, which is 26.2 GP hours. Descend vertically until the atmospheric pressure is 700 millimeters of mercury, which will be at an altitude of approximately 1,000 meters. Since you rely largely upon that sense called sight, allow me to caution you now not to trust it. When your external pressure is 700 millimeters of mercury, your altitude will be 1,000 meters, whether you believe it or not. Stop at that pressure and inform me of the fact, meanwhile holding yourself as nearly stationary as you can. Check so far? QX. But do you mean to tell me that we can't locate each other at 1,000 meters? Kinnison's amazed thought escaped him. What kind of... I can locate you, but you cannot locate me, came the dry reply. Everyone knows that Trenco is peculiar, but no one who has never been here can realize even dimly how peculiar it really is. Detectors and spy rays are useless, electromagnetics are practically paralyzed, and optical apparatus is distinctly unreliable. You cannot trust your vision here. Do not believe all that you see. It used to require days to land a ship at this port. But with our lenses and my sense of perception, as you call it will be a matter of minutes. Kinnison had flashed his ship to the designated position. Cut the berg, Thorndyke. We're all done with it. I've got to build up an inert velocity to match the rotation and land inert. Thanks be to all the gods of space for that. The engineer heaved a sigh of relief. I've been expecting it to blow its top for the last hour. I don't know whether we'd ever have got it meshed in again or not. QX on location in orbit. Kinnison reported to the as yet invisible spaceport a few minutes later. Now, what about that Lensman? What happened? The usual thing, came the emotionless response. It happens to altogether too many Lensmen who can see, in spite of everything we can tell them. He insisted upon going out after his Wilnix in a ground car, and of course we had to let him go. He became confused, lost control, let something, possibly his Wilnix bomb, get under his leading edge, and the wind and the Trencos did the rest. He was Lagiston of Mercator 5, A good man, too. What's the pressure now? 500 millimeters. Slow down! Now, if you cannot conquer the tendency to believe your eyes, you had better shut off your visiplates and watch only the pressure gauge. Being warned, I can disbelieve my eyes, I think. For a minute or so, communication ceased. At a startled oath from Van Buskirk, Kinnison glanced into the plate. It needed all his self-control to keep from wrenching savagely at the controls. For the whole planet was tipping, lurching, spinning, gyrating madly in a frenzy of impossible motions. "Sheer off, Kim!" yelled the Valerian. "Hold it, Bus," cautioned the Lensman. "That's what we've got to expect, you know. I passed all the stuff along as I got it. Everything, that is, except that as Wilnick is anything or anybody that comes after thionite. And that a Trenko is anything animal or vegetable that lives on the planet. QX, Dragonsky. 700, and I'm holding steady, I hope." "Steady enough, but you're too far away for our landing bars. Direct the thought, rotating the prime axis of your lens while inclining it somewhat downward. Stop! Mark that line on your circles. Now think of the alignment of your ship in relation to that line. Swing your prow away from that line, clear around, to approach it from the other side. Slow! Hold it! Apply normal acceleration." In a few minutes the crew felt a gentle, snubbing shock, and Kinnison again translated to his companions the stranger's thoughts. "We have grasped you with our landing bars. Cut off all your power and set all controls in neutral. Do nothing more until I instruct you to come out." Kinnison obeyed, and released from all duty, the three visitors stared in fascinated incredulity into the visiplate. For that at which they stared was and must forever remain impossible of duplication upon earth. And only in imagination can it be even faintly pictured. Imagine all the fantastic and monstrous creatures of a delirium tremens vision, incarnate and actual. Imagine them being hurled through the air, borne by a dust-laden gale more severe than any the great American Dust Bowl or Africa's Sahara Desert ever endured. Imagine this scene as being viewed, not in ordinary solid distorting mirror, but in one whose falsely reflecting contours were changing constantly, with no logical or intelligible rhythm, into new and ever more grotesque warps. If imagination has been equal to the task, the resultant is what the three patrolmen tried to see. At first they could make nothing whatever of it. Upon nearer approach, however, the ghastly distortion grew less, and the flatly level expanse of sun-baked mud took on a semblance of rigidity. Directly beneath them they made out something that looked like an immense flat blister upon the otherwise featureless terrain. Their ship was drawn toward this blister. A port opened, dwarfed in apparent size to a mere window by the immensity of the structure. Through this port the vast bulk of the spaceship was wafted upon the landing bars, and behind it the mighty bronze and steel gates clanged shut. The lock was pumped to a vacuum. There was a hiss of entering air. A spray of vaporous liquid bathed every inch of the vessel's surface, and Kinnison felt again the calm voice of Dragonsky, the Rigelian Lensman. "You may now open your airlock and emerge. If I have read aright, our atmosphere is sufficiently like your own in oxygen content, so that you will suffer no ill effects from it. It may be well, however, to wear your armor until you become accustomed to its considerably greater density." "That'll be a relief," growled Van Busker's deep bass, when his chief had transmitted the thought. "I've been breathing this thin stuff so long I'm getting lightheaded." "That's gratitude," Thorndyke retorted. "We've been running our air so heavy that all the rest of us are thick-headed now. If the air in this spaceport is any heavier than we've been having, I'm going to wear armor as long as we stay here." Kinnison had opened the airlock, found the atmosphere of the spaceport satisfactory, and now stepped out, to be greeted cordially by Dragonsky, the Lensman. This apparition was at least erect, which was something. His body was the size and shape of an oil drum. Beneath this massive cylinder of a body were four short, blocky legs upon which he waddled about with surprising speed. Midway up the body, above each leg, There sprouted out a 10-foot-long, writhing, boneless, tentacular arm, which toward the extremity branched out into dozens of lesser tentacles, ranging in size from hair-like tendrils up to mighty fingers 2 inches or more in diameter. Dragonsky's head was merely a necklace, immobile, bulging dome in the center of the flat upper surface of his body, a dome bearing neither eyes nor ears, but only 4 equally spaced, toothless mouths and 4 single, flaring nostrils. But Kinnison felt no qualm of repugnance at Dragonsky's monstrous appearance. For embedded in the leathery flesh of one arm was the lens. Here, the Lensman knew, was in every essential a man, and probably a superman. "Welcome to Trenco, Kinnison of Tellus," Dragonsky was saying. "While we are near neighbors in space, I've never happened to visit your planet. I've encountered Tellurians here, of course, but they were not of a type to be received as guests." "No, Zwilnik is not a high type of Tellurian," Kinnison agreed. "I've often wished that I could have your sense of perception, if only for a day. It must be wonderful indeed to be able to perceive a thing as a whole, inside and out, instead of having vision stopped at its surface, as is ours. And to be independent of light or darkness, never to be lost or in need of instruments. To know definitely where you are in relation to every other object or thing around you. That, I think, is the most marvelous sense in the universe. Just as I have wished for sight and hearing, those two remarkable, and to us entirely unexplainable senses. I have dreamed, I have studied volumes on color and sound, color in art and in nature, sound in music and in the voices of loved ones. But they remain meaningless symbols upon a printed page. However, such thoughts are vain. In all probability, neither of us would enjoy the other's equipment if he had it, and this interchange is of no material assistance to you." In flashing thoughts, Kinnison then communicated to the other Lensmen everything that had transpired since he left Prime Base. "I perceive that your Bergenholm is of standard 14 rating," Dragonsky said, as the Tellurian finished his story. "We have several spares here, and while they all have regulation patrol mountings, it would take much less time to change mounts than to overhaul your machine." "That's so, too. I never thought of the possibility of your having spare machines. And we've lost a lot of time already. How long will it take?" "1 night of labor to change mounts. At least 8 to rebuild yours enough to be sure that it will get you home." "We'll change mounts then, by all means. I'll call the boys." "There's no need of that. We are amply equipped, and neither of you humans nor the Valantians could handle our tools." Dragonsky made no visible motion, nor could Kinnison perceive a break in his thought. But while he was conversing with the Tellurian, 6 of his blocky Regelians had dropped whatever they'd been doing and were scuttling toward the visiting ship. "Now I must leave you for a time, as I have one more trip to make this afternoon." "Is there anything I can do to help you?" asked Kinnison. "No," came the definite negative. "I will return in 3 hours, as well before sunset the wind makes it impossible to get even a ground car into the port. I will then show you why you can be of little assistance to us." Kinnison spent those 3 hours watching the Regelians work upon the Bergenholm. There was no need for direction or advice. They knew what to do, and they did it. Those tiny hair-like fingers, literally thousands of them at once, performed delicate tasks with surpassing nicety and dispatch. When it came to heavy tasks, the larger digits or even whole arms wrapped themselves around the work, and with the solid bracing of the 4 block-like legs, exerted forces that even Van Buskirk's giant frame could not have approached. As the end of the 3rd hour neared, Kinnison watched with a spy ray. There were no windows in the Trenco spaceport, the leeway groundway of the structure. In spite of the weird antics of Trenco's sun, gyrating, jumping, appearing and disappearing, he knew that it was going down. Soon he saw the ground car coming in, scuttling crabwise, nose into the wind but actually moving backward and sideways. Although the seeing was very poor, at this close range the distortion was minimized, and he could see that, like its parent craft, the ground car was in the shape of a blister. Its edges actually touched the ground all around, sloping upward and over the top, in such a smooth reverse curve that the harder the wind blew, the more firmly was the vehicle pressed downward. The ground flap came up just enough to clear the car's top, and the tiny craft crept up. But before the landing bars could seize her, the ground car struck an eddy from the flap. An eddy in a medium which, although gaseous, was at that velocity practically solid. Earth blasted away in torrents from the leading edge. The car leaped bodily into the air and was flung away end over end. But Tragonsky, with consummate craftsmanship, forced her flat again, and again she crawled up toward the flap. This time the landing bars took hold, and although the little vessel fluttered like a leaf in a gale, she was drawn inside the port, and the flap went down behind her. She was then sprayed, and Tragonsky came out. "Why the spray?" thought Kinnison, as the Regellian entered his control room. "Trencos. Much of the life of this planet starts from almost imperceptible spores. It develops rapidly, attains considerable size, and consumes anything organic it touches. This port was depopulated time after time before the lethal spray was developed. Now turn your spy ray again to the lee of the port." During the few minutes that had elapsed, the wind had increased in fury to such an extent that the very ground was boiling away from the trailing edge in the tumultuous eddy formed there, ultra-streamlined though the spaceport was. And that eddy, far surpassing in violence any storm known to Earth, was to the denizens of Trenco a miraculously appearing quiet spot, in which they could stop and rest, eat and be eaten. A globular monstrosity had thrust Pseudopodia deep into the boiling dirt. Other limbs now shot out, grasping a tumbleweed-like growth. The latter fought back viciously, but could make no impression upon the rubbery integument of the former. Then a smaller creature, slipping down the polished curve of the shield, was enmeshed by the tumbleweed. There ensued the amazing spectacle of one half of the tumbleweed devouring the newcomer, even while its other half was being devoured by the globe. "Now look out farther, still farther," directed Tragonsky. "I can't. Things take on impossible motions and become so distorted as to be unrecognizable." "Exactly. If you saw Zwilnik out there, where would you shoot?" "At him, I suppose. Why?" "Because if you shot at where you think you see him, not only would you miss him, but the ray might very well swing around and enter your own back. Many men have been killed by their own weapons in precisely that fashion. Since we know not only what the object is, but exactly where it is, we can correct our beams for the then existing values of distortion. This is, of course, the reason why we Regellians and other races possessing the sense of perception are the only ones who can efficiently police this planet. Reason enough, I'd say, from what I've seen." Silence fell. For minutes the two Lensmen watched, while creatures of 100 kinds streamed into the lee of the spaceport and killed and ate each other. Finally something came crawling upwind against that unimaginable gale, a flatly streamlined creature somewhat resembling a turtle, but shaped as was the ground car. Thrusting down long hooked flippers into the dirt, it inched along, paying no attention to the scores of lesser creatures who hurled themselves upon its armored back, until it was close beside the largest football-shaped creature in the eddy. Then, lightning-like, it drove a needle-sharp organ at least 8 inches into the leathery mass of its victim. Struggling convulsively, the stricken thing lifted the turtle a fraction of an inch, and both were hurled instantly out of sight, the living ball still eating a luscious bit of soil. "Good Lord, what was that?" exclaimed Kinnison. "The flat. That was a representative of Trenco's highest life form. It may develop a civilization in time. It is quite intelligent now." "But the difficulties," protested the Tellurian. "Building cities, even homes, and—" "Neither cities nor homes are necessary, nor even desirable here. Why build? Nothing is or can be fixed on this planet, and since one place is exactly like every other place, why wish to remain in any one particular spot? They do very well in their own mobile way. Here, you will notice, comes the rain." The rain came, 44 inches per hour of rain, and the lightning. Such rain and such lightning must be seen to be even dimly appreciated. There is no use in attempting to describe the indescribable. The dirt first became mud, then muddy water being driven in fiercely flying gouts and masses. The water grew deeper and deeper, its upper surface now whipped into frantic sheets of spray. The structure was now afloat, and Kinnison saw with astonishment that, small as was the exposed surface and flatly curved, yet it was pulling through the water at frightful speed the wide-spreading steel sea anchors which were holding its head to the gale. "With no reference points, how do you know where you're going?" he demanded. "We know not, nor care," responded Tregonski, with a mental shrug. "We are like the natives in that. Since one spot is like every other spot, why choose between them?" What a world! What a world! However, I am beginning to understand why thionite is so expensive. And overwhelmed by the ever-increasing fury raging outside, Kinnison sought his bunk. Morning came, a reversal of the previous evening. The liquid evaporated, the mud dried, the flat-growing vegetation sprung up with shocking speed. The animals emerged and again ate and were eaten. And eventually came Tregonski's announcement that it was noon, and that now, for an hour or so, it would be calm enough for the spaceship to leave the port. "You are sure that I would be of no help to you?" asked Rigelian half pleadingly. "Sorry, Tregonski, but you would fit into my matrix just as I would fit into yours here. But here's the spool I told you about. If you will take it to your base on your next relief, you will do civilization and the patrol more good than you could by coming with us. Thanks for the Bergenholm, which is covered by credits, and thanks a lot for your help and courtesy, which can't be covered. Goodbye." The now entirely space-worthy craft shot through the port, through Trenco's nauseously peculiar atmosphere, into the vacuum of space. End of Chapter 10.